Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia with you today, Cosmic Astrologer. Okay, today I'm going to spend some time to give you guys some tips of things to be looking at if you're wanting to look at the world of relationships in terms of a composite chart. Okay, there are various techniques that are used to determine the dynamics between two people. As I've mentioned before, one method is synastry. Another method is composite charts, which is what I'm going to be focusing on today because synastry will take another video. And there are Davidson charts as well, which is very similar to a composite chart, okay? But leaving Davidson out and leaving synastry out, let's just focus on a composite chart. So first of all, what is a composite chart? How is it constructed? Very simply put, a composite chart is looking at two people's charts, so the sun in this person's chart and the sun in that person's chart. What is the midpoint between the two suns of the two individuals in question? That midpoint that is created between the two suns of the two individuals, that creates what's called the composite sun. Okay, so that is basically what happens with the whole charts. So the person's Venus, midpoint. What is midpoint between that person's Venus and that person's Venus? The midpoint between that person's Mars and that person's Mars creates the composite Mars, etc., etc. So I think you get the idea. Now, you don't have to do this yourself, particularly if you've got access to software, astrological software that enables you to put in the details of yourself and another individual, or anybody for that matter. You can do a composite chart for any relationship at all, really. But the focus today with this video is love relationships, intimate love relationships. And what I want to bring to your attention today are the things that I actually use in terms of what I look for when I'm actually reading a relationship chart, okay? So, I mean, I'm going to go through the main highlights or points, if you like, and I'll expand a little bit on each, but there's certainly a lot more. There always is more, right? Okay, so the sun, the composite sun, actually before I go there, sorry, just going back a step. So once you've actually created the composite chart out of the two people's birth details, time of birth, place of birth, date of birth, this is why you need time of birth. It's really crucial. If you don't have a time of birth for the other person, then you're not going to get the accuracy of the location of the planets in the composite chart. Because what happens is, well, first of all, two individual charts become one chart, okay? That one chart becomes what's called the composite chart, and that is the relationship, plain and simple. So if you don't have a time of birth for somebody, you can still do a composite chart, but you're not going to get the accuracy of the locality of the planets, okay? And it is fundamentally crucial to know the locality of the composite sun, the composite moon, the composite Venus, composite Mars, etc. Okay, so that's how a composite chart is created, by two individual birth dates, time and place, brought together, all midpoints taken between every single planet, and that becomes the one chart. Hopefully that's clear for you. You don't need to worry about it too much because, as I said, if you've got access to software, astro.com, I believe you can do a composite chart through their system as well, and that's free online, as most of you are aware. Okay, so when I look at a composite chart, actually, I wonder if I should, well, I'll just say this. I've been working with composite charts for many years, and I've had several relationships in my time, and I can say that every major relationship I've had has been what I can identify as a karmic relationship, and a relationship that I have had before with this person, perhaps not in the same context in terms of being lovers in a previous life and having that intimate one-on-one relationship. I've had relationships with men in this life or in the previous life. One was my brother in another life. In another one, I was his mother in another life, and I abandoned him. So that brought up a whole bunch of stuff that I had to deal with this lifetime. And I'll just quickly tell you, so this relationship lasted for 2 years, and for the 2-year period, this particular individual that I was with was so clingy. He wanted my attention all the time and was incredibly demanding. But unfortunately, because of certain other factors in our composite chart, that came out through a lot of aggression. So he brought in a lot of anger from the past, where I was his mother and I abandoned him. So he's come back into my life this incarnation as my boyfriend, and he always had this fear that I was going to leave the relationship, and in the end I did. But it was just this constant underlying theme for him, where the way it sort of played out in his mind this lifetime was that he said that I had a problem with commitment and that I wasn't able to commit to the level that he wanted. And that wasn't actually true, but that's what he was perceiving and that's what he was feeling based on what he was carrying within himself, really. So it was a very turbulent relationship emotionally and mentally. And we had a Sun-Venus conjunction in our composite chart, and Sun-Venus really describes the sexual component that brings two people together, but it can be a bit of a love-hate relationship as well. Mars is anger and Venus is love. So when Mars is operating at that very primitive ego level, it can be severe aggression and violence as well. And unfortunately, those elements did come through in this partnership from his side. We also had a Saturn-Mercury conjunction, and I know I haven't talked about what I was going to start off with, but I'll get to what I was going to explain in terms of what to be looking at. But this is a really great example. It's from my personal life. So it's real, I've lived it, and therefore I know it, I know what it's like. So if you have a Saturn-Mercury aspect in the composite chart, which I had this with this particular individual, Saturn and Mercury were conjunct, so they were right next to each other in the chart. It usually means that there's a struggle with communication in the relationship, okay? Because Mercury is communication, and Saturn is blocks and limitations and fears as well. So how it played out in my example is that every time I spoke about philosophical, spiritual, or astrological subjects, this person would immediately get his back up and would feel quite inferior, and would feel that when I was trying to have a conversation with him or trying to share something or maybe even teach him something, because these were not areas that he was versed in at all. He hadn't studied astrology, he hadn't practiced spirituality, he hadn't really explored philosophical aspects or subjects in life, so that these were very new to him. And for me, in any relationship, or particularly in a one-on-one personal relationship, it's important for me to communicate these aspects of life because I feel like they're part of my soul, they're part of who I am, and they just come through me. So when I'm in a partnership, I really need to share those aspects. So every time I try to share something, this is Saturn Mercury, he would come in with a block, in the sense of he'd accuse me of trying to put him down. He'd accuse me of thinking that I was smarter than him. He'd accuse me of just things like that, essentially. So basically what that did was it would make me take a step back and withdraw from essentially sharing wisdom and soul things that I love. In the beginning, I kept on trying to push a little bit and trying to say, no, hang on a minute, that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to share something with you, and you know, it'll be great for you to get a feel for it, and then we can, you know, you can learn and we can share this stuff and have conversations, etc., etc. Anyway, that just didn't work. It just was not going to work. So all I felt was that there was this just constant block and shutdown every time I did speak. I remember I was studying my counselling degree at the time, so this was quite a few years ago. I have grown since then, but it was a karmic relationship anyway. But I was studying my counselling degree, and we lived in the same building, and he had some great qualities. I don't want to make him out to be this, you know, monster. He had a lot of great qualities as well. I'm just speaking about the dynamics of Saturn, Mercury conjunction and Mars, Venus, and how they can play out. And when you've brought in past life stuff as well, which he and I did bring in past life issues that we needed to work through. And by the way that showed up is that we had a Sun Chiron conjunction in our composite chart. Now that's a relationship that is incredibly wounded to begin with, because we've brought in the wounds from the past, particularly him, because it was me that abandoned him. So I had to pay something back, as it were, in terms of the 2 years that I was with him. I had to constantly reassure him and make him feel safe in the relationship, but it didn't work. It didn't matter how hard I tried, it just wouldn't work. So yeah, when I was studying counselling, I'd be sitting on my computer and I'd be studying, you know, writing an essay or something like that, and he would have had a couple of glasses of wine by that stage, which would stir him up emotionally, and he'd get angry at the fact that I was studying. So he tried to interfere with my studies as well and just stop me from even achieving my goal at that time. So a lot of difficult stuff was going on. And this is seen through Sun Chiron in our composite, Venus, Mars conjunction, and Saturn, Mercury conjunction. Okay, so composite charts are incredibly powerful. I cannot begin to tell you how powerful they are. And what I've learnt along the way is this, and this might sound crazy to you, but I don't care, because I know that if I don't do this, I land in situations that are futile, essentially, and that are not meant for me, and that are not going to enable my path of growth and evolution. And what I mean is this, that if I meet a guy that I'm attracted to or that I like, the first thing I do, well, after a bit of a general chit-chat, I'll ask them for their time of birth, date of birth, and place of birth. And if they don't give me that information, I won't even begin to explore a relationship with that person. You can view that as you like, it doesn't really matter. I just know that when I don't have the opportunity to view the composite chart, I'm walking into things that are generally a waste of my time frequently. Okay, now I have done that before, where I haven't looked at the composite chart and I've just gone with it at a whim and just, you know, giving it a shot. And it's when it hasn't felt right very early, and it's failed very quickly. I shouldn't use that word failed, but I guess that the dynamics weren't suitable. You know, it just didn't work for whatever reason. Then I go back and I look at the composite chart and I can see all this stuff going on, which describes to me, you know, the elements that I felt and that I was experiencing. So what might that be? I'll give you an example. It could be the Saturn Mercury, it could be Saturn Mars, Saturn Venus. Saturn Venus is actually not a nice aspect in a composite chart at all, because it thwarts and blocks the sensual sexual appetite of the relationship. Venus is the sensual delights and pleasures of life on a large spectrum, but certainly in terms of the physical encounter and experience. So if you put Saturn there, it pretty much blocks the potential for the sensual life to even be born in that relationship. And how it might show up is that you get to know this person, and perhaps you're at a stage where you begin to explore intimacy, and you try to go into that space, and there's something very awkward about being intimate with that person, and it sort of leaves you feeling a bit puzzled because, you know, maybe you were having these great conversations and you had a lot of things in common. And so on that level, things work okay. But then when you try to go to an intimate level, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many ways you try to explore that. There's just a block. It just doesn't work. That's what Saturn and Venus will do in a composite chart. Okay, so before I perhaps give more examples, and I'm already on 15 minutes. When you're looking at a composite chart, the first thing you need to look at is the sun. Okay, where is the sun located in this composite chart between you and this other person? The sun actually shows you the purpose and meaning of this connection, of this relationship. So what's the driving primary force and purpose that's brought the two of you together? The sun's location and the sun's aspects are going to show, first of all, the sun, the sign and the house is going to show the purpose, and the sign is going to show the characteristics of how that, you know, comes through. And the aspects to the sun are going to show, is the purpose of the relationship supported by other planetary energies, or is it being thwarted, squashed, blocked, challenged, etc.? So, you know, obviously soft aspects, harmonious aspects, or even harder aspects when it comes to Jupiter and Venus are okay. What you really want to see is a Sun-Venus conjunction or Sun-Venus-Jupiter conjunction. That's a beautiful aspect, a beautiful energy to share with somebody in a relationship. I mean, Sun-Venus alone is a strong indicator that there's a really strong love immediately between the two people. And yes, you can say that, well, no one knows somebody immediately. Well, of course not. But certainly if they've been together in the past, there's a sense of being familiar with one another in some way, shape or form, even though it's not conscious yet, but it becomes conscious as the relationship evolves. But Sun-Venus is the best aspect to have in a composite chart by far. So the sun shows you the purpose, as I said, of why the two people have come together. Okay, so say for example, sun in the 10th house, it's not really the ideal placement for a composite sun in terms of an intimate relationship, but how it might work on a really positive level is that the couple have come together to do something very public together. So they're seen in the public eye. You know, maybe they work together, or they've got a business together, they've got, you know, charities, they're involved in all sorts of different things on a public level. Okay, so from that perspective, the sun in the 10th is great. It's fantastic. That's its primary purpose and function, actually. So the couple feel very connected and very bonded through achieving those goals together on a public level. So there's nothing wrong with having the sun in the 10th house at all, but what I'm saying is that in terms of the sensual, sexual components of a relationship that most, I would think most people need or desire for, there are certain houses that are really optimum for that, and there are certain houses that are not, and I'll tell you what they are in a moment. So you look at the sun, house location and aspects. The aspects are going to show you, is the purpose of the relationship being supported? If it's not, then why is that? You know, is it because the sun has some really difficult aspects by certain planets like Saturn or Mars? If it does, then that's going to give you a whole story of what's happening there. And I'm not going to go into that because I'd need hours to delineate those sorts of things, but I'm just giving you some tips and things to think about. Okay, so the next thing you would look at is the moon. Where is the moon located in the chart? The moon is super, super important, just like the sun, but in a different way. So the moon shows first of all, the emotional connection between the two people and also the soul connection between two people. And is the emotional life of this relationship and these two people, therefore, supported? And if it's supported, it would mean that it's in a good house, it has good aspects to it, and so forth. If it's in a difficult house and it has difficult aspects, it's going to highlight some really tense emotional complexities between the two people that may or may not be resolved, depending on lots of other factors in the chart. But you really want a moon that is supported in a composite chart, because one of the fundamental connections between people is an emotional bond and an emotional connection. So if that's lacking, or if that's blocked or challenged, it really doesn't make it easy to sustain a long-lasting relationship, because both people are going to feel emotionally disconnected, perhaps, or emotionally not understood, or emotionally blocked, etc., etc. Okay, so the moon is absolutely crucial in terms of its location and aspects, as is the sun. The sun is the primary purpose of why the people have come together. The moon is the emotional soul bond connection, and whether that's supported or not, its house location is going to show you that everyday mundane things that the couple get up to. So all the habitual sort of patterns and themes and things that they do together, and how they nurture each other as well, and how they nurture the relationship, is going to be seen through the moon's house placement and aspects. Okay, so another thing, well, there's so many things, but I'm just going to go through, you know, maybe 5 or 6 points, let's say. So the next thing to be looking for is are Mars and Venus having an aspect to each other in the composite chart? And if they are, what is that aspect? Of course, what houses are Mars and Venus in as well? A Mars-Venus conjunction, as I mentioned before with my own example, a conjunction is often a point that is filled with no awareness. Okay, it's the birth and the beginning. It's where you plant the seed. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of intense sort of energy there, and passion, and loads of potential. But in terms of how it grows and where it goes, well, that's a whole other story, and that will depend on other things in the chart as well. So a Mars-Venus aspect in terms of conjunction doesn't necessarily mean that the couple are going to be in this intense, passionate relationship. It can be that, but it can also be intense sort of love-hate conflict as well. As I mentioned before, you know, Mars's aggression at its lowest, most primitive, basic ego level, it's that drive and desire of what I want, and I'm going to push everybody and everything out the way in order to get what I want. That's what Mars does. That's its primary function, particularly on an ego level. But obviously at a more conscious, evolved level, then even Mars can operate quite differently. It just depends on the chart, the individual, etc. Right? So Mars-Venus locations and aspects. And then you want to be looking at Saturn's location. That's major, because Saturn is very often the planet that's associated with karma. So it could very well show the karmic connection in the relationship. Okay, so its house location is going to be really, really important, and of course the aspects that it has. And again, another really important planet is Pluto. Never forget to look at Pluto. If we think about Pluto just on the individual level, Pluto is our soul. It's our soul's purpose. It's the soul's drive, or it's the driver of the soul, right? So your journey, your journey in this life is being driven by Pluto, and that can be, you know, compulsions, unconscious compulsive behavior, stuff like that. So when you're looking at Pluto in the composite chart, it is saying something about the soul purpose of the relationship, and depending on Pluto's house location and aspects, again, that's going to show, you know, is the soul purpose supported, or is it challenged? and his house location is going to show you if there's some past karmic stuff there as well that you've brought in, as Saturn does also. And to connect to that even further, when you bring in the nodes, we must look at the South Node and the North Node in the composite chart as well. And definitely a planet on the South Node is usually, the way I read it at least, it's an indication of what the couple have brought in from the past. So the planet on the South Node will describe a lot of the sort of instinctual, unconscious kind of behavior and patterns, and anything on the North Node is going to show what can potentially help this relationship move towards the North Node. And certainly if there is a planet on the North Node, it's also an indication that you know, this partnership is really, really important from a soul level, and these two people have come together to really grow and achieve something from that soul level. So again, that would depend on what planet is on the South Node, what planet is on the North Node, much like when you're looking at your own birth chart, okay? But in this case, we're looking at a relationship, so we're looking at two people and their soul's purpose as to why they've come together this lifetime. It is my understanding and my experience that usually what seems to happen is that we come together with somebody because there is some kind of unfinished business that we have not completed in a previous life. And of course, with all these ideas, you would need to be open to past lives and future lives, etc. If you're not, then this won't sit well with you. You'll struggle to accept it and to understand it as well. So yeah, Pluto, major in a composite chart, as is Saturn, and as are all the other planets that I've mentioned. And that's not to say that the rest of the remainder planets are not important. They are. But the first thing that you really want to be looking at is Sun, Moon, nodes, Pluto and Saturn, okay? Now, I mentioned before that there's what I would consider houses that are really conducive to a sensual, passionate, intimate, sexual connection with somebody. So there are houses that that are more conducive for that energy to emerge and for the two people to experience that. Pardon me. And there are houses that are really complex and are not really bringing up the sexual stuff. Now, there are a lot of people in relationships, in partnership, that have a sexless relationship or sexless marriages. You know, that's not an uncommon experience for people. There's all sorts of themes and things going on for people, okay? So you can see it through astrology is what I'm trying to say. So the houses that you would really want a composite sun in are 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11. So I'll say that again. 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11. You can consider those houses to be really great, really cool for a composite sun to be in terms of the sensual, sexual, intimate aspects, okay, that two people can share ongoing. The remainder of the houses have a different feel for them, okay? So I'll give you a few examples. Now, I've had a relationship with a guy many years ago. Again, this is a different one, where we had a Sun-Venus conjunction, so that really brought us together. You know, Sun-Venus is just beautiful. You can feel it immediately. It's like when you sit down with someone and you've got a Sun-Venus composite conjunction, it's that feeling of feeling really comfortable, really, it's a soul sort of love. It's that beautiful kind of, you know, fuzzy feelings in your tummy. You feel, you almost feel at one. It's a really beautiful aspect to have. So it's the meeting of two people where there's just this instant sort of love that's there, and you don't even know why, because you have only just met this person. Okay, but that's what a Sun-Venus produces. And I've had Sun-Venus conjunction in a composite chart quite a few times in my life. I've been very blessed in that way. And the example I was about to give now, though, has a different edge to it, okay? Because, yes, we had the Sun-Venus, which really brought us together initially. But we had a few other things going on that described different things. And what I mean is this. So we had our composite Sun-Venus in the 3rd house, which is not difficult and not a terrible thing. But what it means is that because the 3rd house is the Gemini house ruled by Mercury, and it involves siblings, okay, there was a sense that this person that I was with for quite some time, it was my longest relationship, there was a sense that he was kind of like a brother to me. I know that might sound weird, but he was such a caring soul and such a caring person for me. And there are incredible things in our synastry chart that show the emotional support and the support of me, and the support of my path in life, and how this person came to me to really support my soul's path and evolution on every single level. But the Sun in the 3rd house made me feel like we were brother and sister in a way. And it wasn't even a conscious thought. It's not like I sat there and thought, oh, this dude feels like my brother. It wasn't like that. It was just something that I sensed on an underneath sort of level. And interestingly enough, a couple of years into the relationship, I had a reading by a lady who does past life readings. And the story that she gave me was just magical and incredible, and really felt true. So in short, he and I were brother and sister in a previous life, and it was a life where astrologers and women, namely, who practiced Wicca and astrology and things like that, were essentially persecuted. So in that lifetime, I had quite a vocal voice, where I was an astrologer, and I was a witch and things like that, and I was persecuted by my community, and it was a really, really horrible experience. And this person who was my brother in that life loved me so dearly as his sister, and he couldn't help me in that lifetime. He had to sort of stand at a distance and watch me be ridiculed and persecuted and put down and so forth for my wisdom and my teachings. And as he stood by and watched me have to fight and defend myself, he experienced a lot of suffering and a lot of trauma. So we come back together in this lifetime, and from the day I met this guy, all he did was bring goodness into my life on every single level, and encourage my path with astrology, with all the things that my soul loves. And we had Sun in the 3rd, which is a relationship that feels like a sibling type of relationship. So there you go. There's another example, a very powerful example of how powerful composite charts are. Okay, we're on to 35 minutes, so yeah, I think I'll leave it there. So just to recap, position of the Sun, position of the Moon. The Sun is the purpose, the Moon is the emotional soul connection and support of the relationship. Oh yeah, so just another point, sorry, going back again, just another point on the 3rd house. So I mentioned that the 1st, 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th and 11th are all great houses for the composite Sun and Moon. And I mentioned that the third house brings up that sense of sibling sort of connection with a person, but it's also a connection with a meeting of minds, okay? Because the third house is the house of the mind as well, but it's the left brain, so it's the everyday kind of ideas of things that connect to people. But it's a sharing of that, you know, and that's a really important part of life, you know, when two people are together, to be able to really share their ideas. And you put Venus there, Sun Venus in the third, there's a love of listening to each other's ideas and sharing those together and sharing your values and things like that. Ninth house, if you were to put the Sun Venus in the ninth house, it's not the greatest house for a passionate, sensual, sexual relationship, but it's a great house for a meeting of the minds. And this time we're talking about the right brain, which is the intuition, the third eye. So these people